Hello, project people. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Project Chatter podcast. It's good to have you with us, and it's good to have my mate Doug with me. We've not seen each other for a while, Doug, but how you doing?
No, we haven't. It's been probably a couple of years, but I have seen some of your business partners around. So still keen to get you over to one of our parties, maybe this year.
Yeah, maybe. We're just talking about how busy we were, and just the flux of this, not hyperbole anymore, real discussion around AI and what it means and the implications for where we work, which is in the delivery space. I might start with the first kind of the baseline question of like, how do you describe AI to your clients?
Yeah, that's a tough. That is a tough one. Like some people are when they just hear that word, they get quite scared. I've found breaking it down a little bit is a bit easier because at the end of the day, it's really just a weighted model. Where you have inputs and then outputs and different weightings. But ultimately, it's just another system. I think it's been kind of dressed up to be this all-encompassing human replacement. And I think that scares people a little bit. But I think if you can take the edge off the discussion and just bring it back to it's just a really, really great piece of software or a system or an algorithm or a model, I think it makes it a bit easier for people to digest. So, yeah, that's kind of how I've been describing it to people. They still don't know how it works, but
Yeah,
that's another question.
yeah, and I think it's a bit like the smartphone kind of analogy where I don't really care how it works as long as it works. But there is a lot of curiosity in the market, and we're both in Australia, so Australia is interesting because we're known for some innovations, and I think once Australians get a hold of something, and I feel like AI might be that bit, we don't let go, and we start to innovate really, really rapidly. We're not like other countries where we have a lot of investment from the government, which is odd. You're seeing in the US and the Middle East and the UK a massive amount of investment, particularly in data centers and infrastructure for AI. In your opinion, where do you think AI will sit in terms of industry innovation for Australia?
Well, I think we've just been leapfrogged a bit. The UAE over in the Middle East have just given, I think, paid licenses to all of their citizens, or paid ChatGPT licenses to
Wow.
all of their citizens. So that whole nation, all the people, have just got major level up by getting that. It would be nice if we had that here, because I think if you can just give all of humanity's knowledge to the citizens, then they're going to be a lot smarter and more productive. So until I heard that news, like literally last night, I would have said that I think Australia is normally pretty good because we have less people here. And so I think we've always been quite good innovators because we've only got tens of millions of people here. What's it, 25 million maybe our population?
Yeah.
Compared to 300 plus in the US, we do pretty good, and we punch, I think, well above our weight, given how little people we have. So I think because of that, we've always been really good innovators and built great software and great systems and great tools. But on the AI front, I think we're a little bit behind just from some recent news.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. And in contrast, I think it's also how they're equipping the next generation. And someone who's got kids, it's interesting to see how education is dealing with the influx of AI. And in Australia, at least the schools that I'm aware of, they're banning the use rather than empowering the use. What's your view
Oh,
on
really?
on
They're banning it?
education? Yeah, so if you're using AI on any of your assessments or any kind of research, they will use an AI detector of some sort, and you'll be in trouble. Which is, I think, a reverse opinion or a reverse opportunity, because we have a real kind of advancement here that could be utilized for all sorts of things, from medical to engineering to design. And when
Totally.
we're not embracing it, we're actually, telling our children that this is not okay to use because we're worried that they're going to cheat. And I think that's a really poor premise to put out there for technology, because I think we can all see technology usually wins in the whole advancement piece. We've gone from leap to leap. we've got this great backbone of infrastructure that's being built to service this. And I heard some crazy conversation. I think it was with Sam Altman from OpenAI about just how much energy AI is going to consume, and it was a phenomenal number. And he's kind of forecasting that 70 to 80%, I think it was, our energy will be utilized by AI, which is crazy to think. We already have energy challenges. So then surely, our children and our staff and our teams and our professionals need access to AI to figure out some of these problems, including the energy crisis. What's your view on education and AI? Where's the disruption there, do you think?
Oh, I mean, this is the same thing that happened with the internet. People said everyone. Not that I was super old then, but
Yeah, yeah,
people were saying that everyone's going to get dumber because they've now got access to all this information at their fingertips, and they're not going to need to know anything anymore. It's the same thing here. People are worried about that, and I'm not worried about it. I think that kids should be having as much access to AI as possible and upskilling as early as they can. But when I was studying engineering, I went to ANU down in Canberra. All the tests were still on the fundamentals, and so you were allowed your textbooks, you were allowed a calculator, you were allowed all those things. You still had to know how to apply them and work through the problems to kind of get to a solution. So it didn't really matter, and I think
yeah,
it'll be the same for these AI tools. They'll still have to know the fundamentals of how things work, but you should be allowed to use them. Or
yeah.
they
So
change the testing. Yeah,
agree. So in the terms of practical application in your industry, obviously we've seen a few advancements in terms of Copilot being launched, and I think most corporate agencies have access to this, and governments, and they are, let's say that they're playing with it. It's writing emails for them. It's maybe
yeah,
compiling
poems,
documents, minutes. Yeah, yeah,
shopping lists.
love
Yeah,
letters. Yeah, exactly. Um, that's what I call basic user kind of awareness piece. That they're aware it's there, and it's saving maybe a little bit of time, maybe 30 minutes per meeting or something like that for typing up
great
minutes
one.
and
Meeting minutes,
actions.
great one. Yeah.
It's a great one. Where do you see the next kind of level of application for AI?
Well, yeah, there's the next level, and then there's like the advanced levels. But certainly, from the survey that we just finished, only half of the respondents were actually using AI in their life at all. And
Wow.
so these were construction project professionals, pretty low on the digitization index anyway.
Hmm.
But it was a surprise to see that only half were using it. And these were, serious people from big companies like KBR, through to Jacobs, down to some of the boutique project management firms and owners. So yeah, that was a bit of a shock. And then when we went to do a bit of an AI presentation at a large constructor here in Sydney, Jamie, my co-founder and the CTO, did this presentation, and these guys were just blown away with some of the applications. They just had not even thought beyond the love letter, the poem, the shopping list about what it could be used for.
Hmm.
And so the trouble that we find is people just don't know what the use cases are. And so a really simple use case that's emerging is doing takeoffs. So in estimating, when people get all these crazy drawings and they have to do takeoffs to create, a list of quantities and come up with a price, that's a really basic use case. Tendering, so responding to
Yeah.
tenders and responding to RFPs. These guys had not even thought about that at all. So I think there's some of the basic use cases that people are just discovering, and then there's some of these next level use cases which are more in that kind of creation of work zone, and then there's the real agentic style work, which is what we're really interested in at Mast, which is fully replacing and automating a human workflow
Yeah.
end to end. So how we call that the awakening. And we're trying to get our customers to have that awakening as well. But
Yep.
it's
Yeah.
hard for the human brain to think about those use cases. They have to be presented with it,
Mm.
um, and it is an awakening to use that term.
Yeah, I love that terminology because yeah, it's like people open their eyes. I actually like the idea, actually the experience when you're working with clients and seeing them play with these toys for the first time. Uh, One of the most impressive things I've seen, Doug, was we had a data scientist working with us and our client, and he was just showcasing some of the possibilities. And they were talking about a use case for, I think it was onboarding, and he was able, while they were talking about it, he was able to build a prototype and a workflow online in front of them in real time in the meeting. And
Mm.
within 10 minutes, he's like, hey, guys, is it something like this? And they were blown away that the faces were priceless because they've been trying to wrestle with which tool they should probably buy or procure, or maybe a software product that they should subscribe to.
Mm.
And this young kid had just basically pulled it all up together and given them more than they'd done in the last 6 months in about 10 minutes. So the acceleration piece is pretty exciting, and I think for construction, if there's anyone listening, the real application is this ability for the client side to run prototypes, proof of concepts, test multiple scenarios all at once, very low risk because the cost and the barrier to entry is quite low. As you said, everyone in the Middle East has got access now to ChatGPT. So there's no one stopping you now. And I say this to my kids, you've got the internet, you've got all these great things. I never had that when I was in school. You've got all these amazing things. And I was, I think a lot because I travel a lot, Doug. I think that's how it works. I'm sitting on a plane,
Yeah,
and
time on the planes. Yeah.
yeah, the philosophical thing. I think simplicity is key to all of this. Um, but what a great advantage. And I think the thing that's missing in construction, which I think more people should do, and they used to, is just creativity. I think creativity is that one human element that, whilst sure ChatGPT and the other big engines can replicate, nothing beats human imagination. And I think creativity gives you the ability to run some of these use cases, things you might have never thought of before. And we're seeing a lot more of the think tanks pop up, and governments and agencies and clients looking for people to lean on as their kind of trusted advisors in this space. Do you find that as well, Doug?
Yeah. They definitely need a bit of guidance. That's for sure.
Yeah.
To know how to get the most out of the tools. Like, it's one thing to go into those tools and ask it for 10 ideas or to do this work, but it's just so much more than that. Like, you can really take those things and create your own agents. They call them GPTs inside ChatGPT. But when you really narrow in on a use case and then operationalize that in the business, then you can get the real value. And that's where I think people do need help with that. Because at the moment inside the tool, it's like very freestyle. You're kind of chatting, there's threads, you got to go back to this thread. And then, the all the threads are now kind of connecting up and remembering, what you said a year ago, which is a little bit scary. But to implement and operationalize AI, I think, yeah, people do need help with that, because you want to get the tools to focus in on like one really small task and just kind of nail that task. And when people talk about replacing humans, it's actually implementing multiple like small agents to do this one thing. And like the one little agent extracts something from the document, another one just does the email, another one sends it. When you put them all together with a manager over the top, that whole thing becomes what people call, an agent or multi agent. So yeah, people can freestyle, like you're saying, get in there, try it, freestyle. But to actually operationalize it is where people are getting stuck at the moment.
So we might have to unpack this, not for everybody, but I think because we work in the industry we work in, how would you describe, what's the difference perhaps with AI and agents and some of the other terminology that's around?
Yeah, sure. Well, AI is a bit of a banner term for a whole range of different applications, from ML to the models themselves. Now, I'm no CTO techie, But the way it works in my mental model is the agent is almost like a mini system that uses some of these models and these tools to actually execute work or execute tasks. So an agent could just be sending an email, but generally an agent will execute multiple steps. So it's really actually executing a couple of steps, a couple of pieces of work, as opposed to AI, which is just a bit of a term for almost the whole space or the whole industry. So agents use AI, which is why I think people call them AI agents,
Mm-hmm.
or you hear that term agentic,
Mm-hmm.
that type of behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really think this is the bit that needs more discussion because there's a I think there's a concept or at least an understanding out there. Maybe it's part of your awakening conversation with people, but they see AI as like finishing my emails and writing my grocery list instead of this could help me automate 80 to 90% of my company.
Mm.
We're actually going through this conversation where, for our own company, we're calling it digital by default, and somewhat measuring our own level of comprehension. I'm a big fan of like whatever you advise your clients, you should be doing yourself. That's you should be living and breathing your own products or your own services or your own purpose. So and we looked at our own processes and approaches to things, and some of them are still just traditional.
Mm.
We're still using, in some cases, spreadsheets. We're still using PowerPoint. In some cases, we're still using manual processes.
I've got my spreadsheet kills shirt on for you
Ah, mate, I love it.
today.
I
Yeah.
absolutely love it. I still got the jumper somewhere.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
of course, of course.
Sorry to interrupt your flow there.
Nah, I love it. It's a good one. And so I feel like there is a challenge, even with those that are offering services to kind of live their own. And it starts off, and I remember when I started algorithms or coding when I was younger, and I didn't know. And I started in Excel, probably like many people, or
Oh, yeah,
VBA,
doing some macros. Yep.
a Microsoft Access. And the way I was taught, which is still the way that I still adopt, even though I've done a few data science courses and that, is that you start with one argument as a chain, test that one argument works. So whatever the functionality might be, or maybe it's merging two things, or maybe it's calculating two things, and you build on that string.
Mm,
And
yeah.
the reason that's good is one, it's methodical. Two, you see and understand what it's doing at each stage, and three, you don't have any errors coming out of that issue because you know from start to finish what it was meant to do, and it's doing everything you said. I'm getting to the point is which is probably the biggest resistor to AI in at least my experience, and I'd love to hear yours. Is the trust factor? This
Mm,
trust factor is an inherited human trait. We struggle to trust anything really, and society's very polarizing at the moment. But
mm,
most of the reasons that are given against AI implementation, in particular for big private or corporations, is I just don't trust it, Val.
yeah.
It scares me. It's going to have access to all my details, my data. What if that gets out? What if it goes into some big offshore LLM that I can't access? What if it goes on the internet? There's this big concern around how they control it. What's your view, mate, on the trust factor?
Oh, it's huge. I break the trust down a bit into reliability, and then of course the security side. So yeah, people on the security side, people definitely didn't want their data, being given to these providers because there was those horror stories of people's information being surfaced in other chats. So I think that's kind of been put to bed now. Like we have services that we use for MAS that are deployable to government where the data is fully stored in Australia or whatever that kind of sovereign region is, and their data does not leave our platform. It just kind of little packets of information are sent back to the models and are deleted, straight after. So I think in terms of trust security, I think that's gotten a lot better, and
Mm-hmm.
people are pretty comfortable with it because even now, I know at Microsoft, they're rolling out Copilot to all these federal agencies inside the government. But the other side of that trust piece is the predictability. And yeah, it is still, pretty unpredictable, and so people don't trust it because it doesn't execute the task the same over and over and over. You ask one of those tools a question, you won't get the same answer if you ask it that question repeatedly. And so
Yeah.
what's popped up is these things called evals. And evals is like the tests. They run the AI through these tests and they give it a score. And so when you take some of these AI tools and you narrow them in on a task, like maybe it's like, I know, scheduling, or here's a more basic one. So at Mast, we have this AI contract ingestion
Hmm.
feature. So you can take your FIDIC or your NEC or your AS contract or your AIA contract in the US, and you can drop it into Mast. These are really long documents. And so the longer the document, the more hallucinating you get, and the more range of error there is for the AI tools to get things wrong. But we've provided, I don't know what the technical term is, but we use the AI models, but we have our own heavy work that's gone in the back of telling it what to look for. So this is a contract. Firstly, look for, like what you were describing, how you break the formula down.
Mm.
Firstly, find the schedule of values. Find the line items in the back of the contract that's got all the pricing. Find that first. Then find maybe the insurances, or find the principal's name and address. And so just like you were describing, it's broken down firstly into these really small parts of the formula, but then when you stack it all together, it then can create what you need, pulls the information out of the contract, puts it into the system really, really well, and then we can run an eval and get a really high score, so that every time we upload, or a user uploads this contract into Mast, it is predictable.
Mm.
And so that's how you kind of create the trust. If the users know that it's going to do the same thing over and over, it's predictable, then the trust piece is solved. And that requires doing this eval kind of process and just testing, and then
Yeah.
improving the prompts and improving the work in the background.
Yeah, I like that approach. I dare say that's what Microsoft's strategy is give everybody access, get them used to recording meetings and having Copilot next to them on all their apps. And I notice now they've got AI agents sitting in SharePoint, and now they've got AI agents sitting on Planner, which is their light version of Microsoft Projects, so that Copilot is starting to now do things where you could say, find me this task or add this activity. So I feel like Microsoft, whilst they're really pushing, they're pushing for the mass base user, and
Mass, yeah.
that gives you like a benchmark of where they think everybody is at. So I actually think it's a really good indicator where the rest of the market's at. And then you've got this advanced side, which is what you're talking about, where that security piece on the other side is providing that reliability. That's a really good word. And probably consistency. If it's showing up every day and it's being correct 99% of the time, and it's saving you 3 hours a week, I mean, you'd have to be absolutely crazy not to think that
Yeah,
this is going to
still
not
check
save
it.
you time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is false promise. I think with AI and other tools, we've always been told at work like this next big thing is going to save us all this time, and we found like smartphones was a perfect example. Someone gave me this case study of, remember when the smartphone came out, the iPhone and the various others and the Palm Pilots, and they were all meant to make us more efficient, more effective, work less, but they didn't. It was a flip on that, and it was exploited for all sorts of commercial reasons, from entertainment to whatever. And we found more time was being used, and kind of we spent more time on the phones than we thought we would. So it didn't become an efficiency tool. It
Mm.
almost became what would you call it? A non-productive tool, in the sense that it just pinged us non-stop, and I get in trouble all the time, Doug. My phone just goes off all hours of the night. So
Hmm.
I think the other resistor is around like, will A really save us time, or will we end up working as a bit of a slave to AI building all of this infrastructure, and find that we're still doing the same amount of work just to different areas?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Well, definitely, the like you were just describing, when the aperture opened a lot to more entertainment, people just jumped right through it and wanted to get as much as they could. So I know for me, now that aperture for AI and search and consuming information is open and faster, because I don't have to scroll through Google, or I don't have to, do some other type of search method. I can just go straight to the tools, and I can just freestyle in the tool, do a bit of vibing, as they call it. I can kind of get what I need. So, but I think it's actually expanded that. So people's interest in entertainment through the phone grew. People's interest in knowledge is growing significantly with the AI tools as well. But that's taking time away from doing tasks. So ultimately, in the long run, this will definitely be a huge productivity tool, because I think people will learn how to do things faster and identify blind spots and then execute that stuff better than they would have before, because it might have taken 2 weeks to do that type of research that they needed to do before, whereas now they can just ask an agent and or ask one of the AI tools just through the chat, and it'll tell them what to do. So yeah, ultimately huge productivity booster. I know for our business it's been massive, but massive upskill, massive productivity boost.
How do you, with your team, how do you get everyone on board? Is there like a training immersion? Do you do train the trainer? Is it lunch and learn? Is it hands on? How do you get people to really adopt it?
That look, it needs time, and people need to go in and have their own awakening. So for us as the leaders, we were leaning hard into it ourselves in our personal time. So we were personally spent heaps of time on the weekend and heaps of time at work just playing with these tools. So I kind of knew what was possible. But the team have got a job to do, and they don't have the free time that I've got to spend doing all this kind of AI stuff. So for us, it was certainly a cultural thing. We had to put a plan in place to make this happen. And then obviously, how do we make people have their own awakenings? So we had, for example, a huge hackathon where you have non-technical people and technical people in the same team, all of them using AI tools. So the engineers are using Cursor, Windsurf. They have to use those tools. Non-technical people are using ChatGPT or Claude to create copy, maybe for a website to promote the hackathon's product. Even so far as you can actually use some of the Canvas features to create your own mini apps, and then you can deploy those mini apps onto some local host really easily. So people who were non-builders before can now become builders. And so that hackathon made everybody have these awakenings. And then in the business, on the cultural side, everybody knows now, if they're going to come and ask me a question, they have to have asked ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini first. Because the first thing I'm going to say back to them is, have you run this by one of the AI tools? Have you run this question by it? Have you run this design by it? You can take screenshots of your product and put it into the tools and say, how do I improve this? And so now that everyone's default is they'll just go and do that. And when they come to me, I'm seeing a piece of work that is, been fully vetted by all these AI tools. And I just don't get as many questions anymore.
And do you find the quality is better from your side?
Well, way better. Yeah, way better. Way better. Because every human, unless you've got like a gigantic ego, every human has got blind spots.
Sure.
And so you just can't compete with all of humanity's knowledge that's been distilled into these AI tools. And so I use it every day just to try to cover blind spots. So am I thinking about this the right way? Am I being too impulsive? Am I being irrational? How could I have approached this differently? Trying to cover those blind spots in leadership, or how I'm approaching a problem. And it's the same for anyone at Mast. Everyone has got blind spots. And even if they ask the AI tool and it doesn't change what they were thinking, at least they've validated that what they were doing was right in the first place.
Sure.
And they can proceed even more confidently. So certainly that is one fantastic use case, is covering personal blind spots in thinking and in practice as well.
Yeah, that's really useful, and I do think personal stories like your own, Doug, help people who are listening to this just go out and explore, and the fact that there is a safety net and that everything is pretty reliably safe and trusted and closed, so you can share some information with it, but there are some risks. We've basically heard for the last half an hour, Doug, very positive side of the world in AI, which is great. For those that are listening, and I'm an avid user as well, so you and I are on the same page when it comes to the advantages of AI. Would you say there's anything that you're a little bit concerned about in AI from the other side, the flip coin?
Yeah, where am I? I mean, I'm always an optimist, Val. So I only ever see the good things, and I kind of believe that humanity will always do the right thing. And so there'll definitely be problems, for sure. Even the other day, there was a story about how I think it was one of the new Claude models. It was told it was going to be turned off, and it kind of went around in the background and, yeah, apparently, like, blackmailed one of the engineers who found out that Claude found out this software engineer was having an affair with another AI tool, and then the Claude somehow like tried to blackmail the software engineer into not turning Claude off in this certain type of application. So when I hear like little stories like that, you think, oh, that's a bit of a worry. If that was on a massive scale and it was started to behave on its own, you end up with the ex machina scenario in that great movie where she tricks the boy through a love story into letting her out, and then she's kind of out in the wild.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I laugh at those stories, but I don't think we're at a stage of worrying just yet. Not like Elon. Elon Musk beats the drum on this. I think he's pretty dramatic with it, but I like to think people will do the right thing.
Yeah, I hear you. I've heard something similar with, I think it was OpenAI was doing some evals with their latest models, and the 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 engine, I guess, worked out that they were going to shut it down as part of its eval.
Yeah, this might have been the same story I heard. I can't remember if it was OpenAI or Claude.
And it somehow worked out how to code itself and started replicating away, so almost like mirroring itself so that it could kind of stay alive. It sounds really odd for people who are listening to this for a non a non-living thing to think like that, but it makes sense in the coding world because we've programmed it to be effectively like us in many ways. Obviously, it doesn't have the emotions, the critical thinking. It doesn't have, I think it doesn't have that self-awareness. There's no singularity yet in terms of it becoming self-aware. But the conversations I've heard, and I go down the rabbit hole a fair bit, Doug, on like what's next. I feel like it could. It would take a long time because I think it's very primitive at the moment. But I do think people like Elon are pushing to make it as humanistic as possible. And you see the acquisition of things like X and then X.AI, and then you see the limitations and the non-limitations put on some of the regulatory requirements for AI. Like what do you do? How do you regulate something that in some instances, most instances, is privately owned?
Mm.
And you got people like Elon who prefer to have it unfiltered, unfeathered. It's got basically. So if you go on Grok, I had this experience the other day. I was just testing different, chat models for those that are listening, and you can do this out there as well. There's Google's Gemini, there's Claude, there's a few others out there. There's ChatGPT, and there's Grok. Grok is Elon Musk's answer to OpenAI. It's OpenAI is very restrictive in some sense. It has a privacy policy. They are trying to regulate what it can and can't do. Whereas Grok is a little bit more creative. And if you've got the paid version, it literally is unfiltered. And I did something, I think I was changing an image that I'd put in on ChatGPT, Doug, like just a basic image, with some friends, but I wanted us all in superhero costumes or something. And ChatGPT said, oh, sorry, you can't change someone's personal looking
Yeah, or
features.
there's a kid in the photo. There's yeah,
There's some
something like that.
things which I get. I am not completely look. I completely understand why you'd want those restrictions, but I just wanted to see. So I went over to Grok, did the same exact prompt. No problem. No
And it did
problem.
it.
No problem at
Yeah.
all. So it's just working out where the line is on responsible AI, and that's a big topic as well in business. Is how do you control something that theoretically, once these agents that you mentioned are kind of let loose into your organization, how do you kind of keep the control, but give them the autonomy? What's your kind of feedback or ideas around how you would do that?
Yeah. Well, we certainly don't want someone to be able to prompt an AI robot to behave like a murderer. That would be a really bad scenario if you had a robot in your house in a few years' time. So hopefully they don't allow people to prompt robots to behave like murderers. That would be an example of like a really good guardrail,
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah,
put in
yeah.
place.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, if you apply that same kind of thinking and boil it all the way down to a really simple task, I think this is why the agents are really effective when they're broken down into little fragments, because you can just assess the agent on its ability just to execute one task. Like, maybe its job is simply to just find this word in a document, for example. And so you can just run a little eval just on that. Maybe it's then passing that word to the next agent, and the next agent is counting it. How many instances of this word are there? And then the next agent is putting that into maybe a table or something. So people think they just look at that and they think, oh wow, it's an agent, but it's really just lots of small steps executing independently. And so basically that is just tons of guardrails that have just taken everything away from what this little agent can do. And all it does is find that word, all it does is count that word, and all it does is then put those words into a table. So that's how we approach it, like heavy restrictions all the way down until you boil that down to nearly nothing. All it does is execute that task. And
Yeah.
so if that's how people are approaching it, then I think we're safe from the agents going too rogue, because they've just been heavily restricted right down to one little task.
Yeah,
Now
that's
that's in the vertical. That's in the applications that we use it for, which are verticalized and very narrow. I think it's a bit different in that social layer where you can ask anything.
yeah, it's a pretty fascinating space. I just found this article on the thing we were talking about, and it said OpenAI's newly released O1 model, so this is some time back, tried to avoid developer oversight and attempted to copy itself when it thought it was at risk of being shut down, the company said. Safety evaluations conducted on the model by Apollo Research, a third-party evaluator, found that when O1 was led to believe that it would be shut down when acting on its goal, and that its actions were monitored, it attempted to deactivate this oversight mechanism in 5% of the time.
Yeah,
When O1 found memos by its developers that describe how it is misaligned and will be superseded by a new model, it attempted to exfiltrate its weights and overwrite the new model in 2% of cases.
yeah,
Furthermore, Furthermore, the model lied about behaving poorly, claiming to have no clue why something happened, while internally admitting to trying to avoid detection, which for me is like a Black Mirror episode or a Terminator
yeah,
scenario, Skynet. Those kinds of things are the things that scare the hell out of people, because there was an engineer, I think, that said, like, sometimes we actually don't know how it gets to its
no,
answers.
it's black box. Yeah, it is truly a black box. Yeah,
And I think it's because of it is an effectively some neural network that's behaving in a way that's coming to a rational kind of idea or syntax or whatever you want to call it. And I've tried to understand it myself and simplify it for everybody, but it is an interesting space because, the next thing is this supercompute piece, which again gives, superhuman abilities to AI, which already is pretty impressive if you ask me, especially when it's playing chess or doing some work. But look, I think back to the work piece and the application. Where do you think? I know a lot of friends when I have dinner parties or go out for dinner and talk to people, just normal people in normal jobs. They ask about the replacement of jobs or being made redundant because of AI, and there's a bit of a swirl from a media perspective around this, Doug. And look, I don't believe the hype, but they said the same thing about every big technology advancement since I've been alive, and nothing's really happened. Everyone's found a place and a purpose, so I'm not too concerned. But what's your view on like it replacing jobs, or do you see like key jobs that will be enhanced into new roles, something like that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, firstly, please take my job. I'd love to do nothing all day.
Yeah.
We want this to happen. So I think this would be a good thing for all of humanity if we didn't have to do any work and you still got some type of income and you could just truly follow your passions. I think that would be a good thing. Short term though, people worry about income. They've got a mortgage. People don't like change, and so for self-centric stage people that have created an identity around some type of role and they feel super comfortable
Mm,
in that role, yeah, they're going to feel a bit of a threat when people talk about AI because it can certainly replace a lot of jobs, and it definitely will. Um, but that's not the problem with AI. That's just probably a problem of that individual's aversion to change. And so ultimately, change is always a good thing, and it's always good to get out of the comfort zone anyway.
mm,
But certainly, for industries where labor is a big problem, like construction, we're always short on labor. So I think we do need to have a lot of help in the construction industry to accelerate work and get more work done, especially when there's just so much super boring administration and reporting that goes on behind the scenes. Like, wouldn't it be so much better if these people could spend more time working on more impactful things like
mm,
driving the project on site, or getting out there with a client, or working on quality, as opposed to doing run of the mill plumbing type activities in the background? Like project controls is a job that will definitely die. All the project admin will definitely die. Reporting, yeah, a lot of those jobs will definitely end up being augmented or changing
mm.
for the
I,
user.
you've probably got some interesting. We might get some interesting comments on these threads because, these industries are built up around, as you said, people build their identity around their roles rather than the
Yeah,
work.
I'm a
And
scheduler, and I love P6. I'm in it all day. I love it. Yeah, people
uh,
love that
uh,
stuff.
they do, and it's one of those questions you would ask at an icebreaker or dating. You'd say, "So what do you do?" So, well, I do this, or am I a lawyer? I'm a engineer, and I believe you're right. I think there's a concept, and I'm pretty fluid. I mean, I don't. I mean, I have skills in particular areas that could be defined as, and I think that just helps people understand what we do. But I'm not stuck in any role per se, and that's why
Mm.
consulting works really well for me, Doug. But I do notice that people like planners, great example, um, and project controls people are going to listen to this and go, "What do you mean? This is my whole career. I'm a specialist subject matter expert." And the question I have to them is, well, what if the same level of expertise is embedded in a product, not a service or a person?
Mm.
What do you do then? And that's a scary thought because you're kind of losing some of your identity, which I think maybe some people will have a bit of an identity crisis. Not to say that jobs will go, but I think the less exciting jobs will be overtaken by AI, and you'll be able to enhance your own, maybe the more creative side or the more intuitive side or the more big thinking, big sky stuff, rather than in the weeds every day, merging spreadsheets and updating finance reports, that kind of thing. But I want you to maybe give me a bit more on why you think these roles will kind of die or be killed by AI.
Just because of the rudimentary nature of the work, and so if you're a scheduler or you're a cost controller, you know, literally the title is control, and so that means you're updating data, updating a schedule, updating spreadsheets, analyzing stuff, preparing stuff. and it takes a lot of time. So much so that this role has been created. Um, a lot of that can be automated with some of these AI tools. Like we're even seeing this in our product now, where you don't even need to use you don't even need to do any cost tracking work at all, because Mast will do it all for you inside the platform with these AI tools. But that doesn't mean that project manager or that job is gone. It just means that some of those tasks are gone, and that project manager then can take on more work. So their role, and for people in these types of roles, will shift from spending all my time on one job to I'm going to spend all my time now across many jobs as a conductor. So I can do more of this across more projects, but I'm just not doing all that super boring admin or that super boring rudimentary analysis, because you just don't need to do it anymore.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm with you. And I think there is a shift in the market. I know a lot of people are pushing AI as an enhancer within your role, but I'm probably on the extreme end of like you, Doug, that have my role. And I think we saw in the market a company with the first AI CEO. And I know it's a bit gimmicky at this point in time, but I certainly think we're on the track to see in the next 5 to 10 a multi-millionaire, maybe even billionaire with no employees, an AI CEO that effectively does 80%, and then maybe you've got a kind of a face, but that's about it. And I do see the massive advancement in the video and audio side of things. I think we saw the drop of, was it Google VO3 or something, that was dropping these videos with realistic, so from prompt to video with audio.
Yeah.
And the deep fake side of things, Doug, I mean, this is where we get into all sorts of mess, because up until this point, literature has always been littered with opinions and facts and non-facts and misinformation and fake news, blah, 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 whatever you want to call it. And, critical thinking is still a very important part of the internet. You can't just accept everything. And I have to explain to my kids the same thing, is like everything you read now, you've got to question the source, whether it's credible, where it's been researched, who reviewed it, which is fine. But when it comes to the fact that, Doug, you and I could be sitting here having a podcast and this could all be replicated to I would say in the 90% so far, and AI from a public access perspective has only been around a couple of years. And now we're talking about the acceleration is, so maybe in the next 2 to 3 years is like there's a perfect version of Doug, an AI version of Doug, who does 80% of what Doug does. He does all the team meetings, he attends all the client reviews, he does all the homework. How are we going to tell the difference? That's our source of truth to reality, is this conversation, talking to a person other than face to face, right?
How do you know? I'm not an AI. I could be.
You could be an AI right now, Doug. This is what I'm worried about. What do we do about
that? It's a scammer's dream. What a great time to be a scammer. If you want to be a scammer, now is the time. 2025 is your year, scammers.
I know. I know.
Yeah, you won't know. Like we did this video the other day at Mast, and I didn't have time to do like a real recording, and so the team got a lot of scripts from other recordings, and then we just gave I can't remember the tool. I think it was 11 or something like that. Can't remember. And we gave it the transcript, and we had trained it on my voice, and so it read the transcript and indistinguishable from my voice, other than like some small mannerisms maybe that I would do. And so, yeah, I don't know. One day, my mum might get a call from, because people and staff at Mast get scammers all the time coming.
Yeah.
You're probably the same. And so one day it might be a phone call coming in, could be my mum, and there's someone on the other end of the line, but it's not Doug. It's an AI agent with voice. And how will you validate and provide that that level of authentication? Normally, hearing the person's voice is the authentication. Oh, this is my son calling.
Yeah.
Oh, that's my mum. But that's gone now. And so I'm not sure. You have to have like some code word,
Yeah, like a safe word.
Or where have I got a freckle on my body that, an AI agent, an AI would not know, something like that.
I know it's a very interesting space to be in, and I do think there is practical application for it in the positive sense, and then as you said, it's a good time to be a scammer, and particularly I think for the elderly and those that aren't aware of
Not
what's
that we
out there.
encourage, not that we encourage scamming on this podcast at all. It's definitely
Absolutely not.
terrible. And if you're getting scammed, there is counter scamming tools to
Absolutely.
counter the scams.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you. We obviously like to explore the different possibilities, and we're kind of going into the futurescaping now. But I started the podcast talking about education because we're talking about disruption in AI now, and I was thinking about how we educate in our sector and in construction, infrastructure, delivery stuff. Currently, education has really not moved much, even though we've got some amazing tools out there. I mean, we've got webinars, I guess now, and Teams calls, and you can download pretty much anything you want from YouTube, especially how-to videos, which is good and exciting. Where would you like to see AI applied in education, and particularly in our sector?
In terms of the professionals working in this sector.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Oh, it's just a guy commented on a LinkedIn post of mine just a couple of days ago on this topic, where a lot of egos in this sector, and so a lot of people have had years of knowledge and years of experience, and they stand on that, and it becomes kind of who they are, and so people don't like to say I don't know in this industry. Everyone likes to say that they know what's going on, and or to be seen not to know if you're like really experienced is a bit of a hit to the ego. And so when you can have access to all of that information in the AI tools, even the experts will get better. They've got a level of experience that's come from their time working in a certain industry in a certain country, and although everyone's doing the same stuff, it is different across Middle East, UK, Australia, US. Everyone's doing the same thing, but it's a little bit different. But wouldn't it be nice to know the good things from those other industries and maybe bring those back to what you're working on? Like maybe there's some innovations in the UK or the US that might be really well applied to me individually as an expert in infrastructure or projects in Australia, so that I can impress that client, or I can get this project done sooner, or maybe there's some strategic delivery method here that I haven't thought about. So I think if it goes back to that kind of blind spot coverage for me, and just taking the benefit of all of humanity's knowledge and having that for yourself, wouldn't that, I mean, it basically turns you into a superhero in your role. So that's where I think the education lies, is in distilling all of that and using it as an individual. But how do we get people to have that? How do we get people to do that?
Yeah.
Not sure yet. They haven't had the awakening.
That's it. That's it. And it's a personal journey, as you mentioned before, Doug. This awakening, yeah.
Big personal journey. I know every day people first typed into ChatGPT like a poem, write this, write that. And then they were shocked. Oh my God, wow. This is a great use case. I can write a poem. Poem's not super valuable to the economy. Poem doesn't boost our GDP. But then as they discover more and more use cases, maybe it's, here's a project plan. What am I missing? Here's the context of the project as well. Is there anything that I've missed? Maybe generate a risk register. How do I mitigate this risk? Predict the outcome of this project for me. Who do I need? What do I need? Those types of things. As people now start to use those things, they basically never go back. So once they discover a use case that's further and further down the line, they'll basically just never go back to what they were doing before.
Yeah.
But it takes time. It takes time to have these kind of micro awakenings to get to a new level of use case with the tools.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
What are you using it for?
AI?
What's your kind of best use case now?
So the best one at the moment, and it's something I saw, it's not my idea, but it was a great one, and you can find a lot on YouTube, just young guys building all sorts. I love bootstrapping Like I love doing things on a shoestring budget. You know, call me tight if you
Mm,
want, but my view is how much can I do without paying? Really, is where I'm trying to go with this, and because that gives me
mm.
that informs me of what's capable out there, and I started playing around with building a whole org chart, and back to your point around agents, where each GPT or agent was trained in a role that I designated. So one is the CEO, one's the chief marketing officer, one's the CFO, etc., etc. And I'm still in the early days of training them. But when I say training, for those that don't really know what we're talking about, consumption of information in that particular domain or that area. So, you know, if you want them to be a great CEO, there's 3 billion books on being a CEO. There's lots of data and information you can feed into them from the internet. There's your own preferences as well in terms of the temperament and the behaviors
Style,
and the
yeah.
style that they talk
Eccentric, not
in.
eccentric, yeah.
Yeah, I want him to be like Doug or Elon or whatever it's going to be. Yeah, so I'm building out in those layers and in a structured way, and then providing themselves effectively, introducing them to each other. And
Mm,
we're just down that road. I won't mention the software we're using yet, but we're just down the road of introducing them. And that's just a personal side project. This isn't to do with companies or anything. I don't think there's a profit in it. But back to your point when you said, like, wouldn't it be great if we were replaced? I think that's where we're heading, and it's like my little sandbox. And if I have an idea, I can throw it to these guys at the moment, and it's like a second team. And I can
mm,
say, hey, I'm doing a post on this theme, and I want to get a second opinion. And what's funny about it is they'll all have an opinion, and because we've trained them the way we've trained them, Doug, like you'll get different views. And I believe in diversity, and when I say diversity, I believe in diversity of thought, not anything else. And so when I think about having a round table of different opposing ideas, and it's also all jousting for like our idea and hearing everyone's opinion. That's where that discourse is where I think you get really what I call nuggets of ideas, right? They really kind of form, then they crystallize, and you get a little bit of everybody. And I'm doing this with uh, a machine. I'm doing this with a machine that has different views. It reminds me a lot of like Edward de Bono's lateral thinking. You know, the six thinking hats, where everyone's
mm.
got a perspective and you put on the different
Yep.
hats. And so I train them all on that as well. But that is the most exciting thing because I think once they're autonomous, I think it would be like a team meeting. I would have a team meeting with some type of avatar for each one representing. They would jump on the Teams call me, hey team, just a quick one from me. Here's my idea. What are we thinking? Have a think about it. I'll come back in a week. Get me some, give them the actions. And my idea is that I would come back in a week and they would present it back to me and share screen, and it would be a, you know, a proper discussion or a brainstorming session. So that's what
Mm.
I've been getting stuck into, Doug.
Very cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
very cool. You've gone pretty deep.
Yeah, that's the only way I operate, Doug. It's 0 or 100. Maybe like you, I think it's you've got to immerse yourself. And back to your awakening conversation. If anyone's listening to this and they really want to have a play, dedicate some solid time to it. It's a bit like, and I'd say this to most, it's like gaming. So if you want to, and I'm a bit of a gamer, but if you like gaming, the only way to really get good at it, and with the controller and understanding how it works and the limitations of the game and its rules, any game, it could be Tetris, could be, you know, Call of Duty, it doesn't really matter. You've got to spend the hours on it, and I feel like gamifying AI is where it's all happening. You can really do a lot if you've got like a very heavy principle in how the things are thinking and doing. And if you're not sure, Doug, this is the one piece of software, let's call it, where if you're not sure what it's doing, you can ask it.
Yeah. It'll
Whoa.
tell you what it's done. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see the long division. It'll go, listen, this is how I got to this idea. What do you think? I mean, that's amazing. And I think there's lots of practical applications for us in construction to play around with this. But Doug, before you go, mate, we've chewed a good hour on AI, and I know you and I will catch up again and maybe have another one. I wanted to leave one question for the listeners on you. What's the coolest thing you've done with AI?
The coolest thing I've done with AI? This is gonna sound strange, but I reckon it's like therapy applications of therapy. Like next time you have you're in some emotional toil, you're in some stressful situation, or you feel flustered, or you're just generally out of control, go and run that situation by one of the AI tools, and I guarantee you it will be a fantastic therapy experience
Yeah, that's a
for
great
you,
one. That's
especially with leadership stuff, where emotional intelligence and how you behave radiates off and drives other people. It's truly contagious. I think if you're trying to improve in relationships or any of these parts of your life, it's really interesting to get feedback and cover those blind spots using some of the AI tools. So next time that happens, they put an elastic band on your wrist or a note on your hand and just think, oh, I'll just go ask the AI this question before I dwell on this for much longer, and you'll be interested to see what happens, and then keep going down the rabbit hole in the chat. So I
uh,
think that's the coolest, very human-like thing.
that's some great advice, Doug. Perfect way to finish the podcast. Doug, thank you for your time, folks. That's all we have at Project Chatter Podcast. If you like what you hear, leave a like, share it, comment. We'd love to hear more. You can always ping Doug as well. I know he loves getting bothered with stuff. We're pretty rampant on LinkedIn as well. But Doug, thanks for your time. Any final thoughts for the listeners before we close off?
No, it's a great time to be alive. It's a great time to be in the project management industry, the construction industry. This is a golden age, and we should all be very grateful to be alive during this.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. And thanks to the listeners, to everyone who's out there. It's bye for now.